Hello, hello, everyone. It's so good to see you. Thank you for joining us for another LinkedIn Live Ask Me Anything session. Now, we're going to be talking about the one thing missing from your CX strategy today that maybe might be a little counterintuitive, but I hope that you'll continue to join us for these. As always, we are interested in your questions, your comments, where you're joining us from in the comments. And at this point, I'd love to welcome in Paige from our team. Paige, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy it's Friday. I'm happy that we're talking about this and it's starting to warm up a little bit in the Midwest here.
Thank goodness. It's been so cold, so much snow. That
Mhm.
stinking groundhog needs to just be ready for spring because I am.
I agree. Yes, we are having this week has been very nice in Chicago. We've had like 40s and 50s, and we might even hit 60 today, is the rumor.
Mine is we might hit 70.
Oh,
I
look at
know.
you
I
with your
woke up
short
this
sleeves.
morning and checked the weather and thought it's already 52 degrees outside
Oh
at
my
7
goodness.
in the morning. Like, I will take it. I'm ready.
Love it. Well, we'd love to hear what it's like for you, where you are, all of those good things. I love this topic, and I think it fits in really well with kind of our whole approach here at Experience Investigators,
Mhm.
and how we really just want to tackle the foundations of getting this right. Because otherwise, you and I both know it's a lot harder if you don't get the foundations right.
Right. And I feel like there's so many more. It can be you wear a lot of hats in
Mhm.
CX, right? You have to constantly be figuring things out, investigating as we do, and
Yes.
being intentional and really getting to the root of the
Mhm.
problem, which can be a lot more than just what is seen.
Yes, absolutely. And we have introduced our CXI Compass a few weeks ago. That is still available to everybody, and we named it CXI Compass. Sometimes people have asked me, "What does CXI stand for?" And I'm like, "We don't really talk about that enough." But it's a registered trademark of ours, actually, where it means customer experience investigation, and that's because it really is about this idea that as a customer experience leader, we need to constantly be like digging in and figuring out what is the root cause? How can we prevent things? What do we need to know in order to know how to be successful? And so that's part of what we're talking about today as well. But I'm happy to see we have a global audience. This is always so fun. We've got a couple Canadians, Toronto and Calgary.
All right.
We got Trinidad and Tobago represented, Charlotte, North Carolina, a whole bunch of them. So keep those coming. Let us know how it is. And as you have questions throughout this event, please go ahead and drop those in the chat, and Paige will come back and we will talk about those things at the end. So let's go ahead and jump in. This is a big, big topic, and I can talk about it for a while. So, all right. Well, hi, everybody. I'm so happy that you're here with us today. My name is Jeannie Walters. For those of you who don't know me, I am the founder and CEO of Experience Investigators, which is a firm that is focused on your success as a customer experience leader. We want your organization to achieve great business results through customer experience, not just something we talk about, but something that is part of who we are. And it takes real leadership. So I'm so happy that you're here with us today. So if you don't already know, we have a couple of courses on LinkedIn Learning as well. So if you have access to that, if you search for my name, I think I have about 9 courses there now. And then we also have a lot of resources for you at experienceinvestigators.com. And if you've missed these, we've been doing these for, gosh, about 5 years now, if you can believe it. There are tons of them out there. We have a playlist for you on YouTube there. You can go to that with that link, bit.ly/GenieYT for YouTube. All right, here we go. Before we jump in, I mentioned the CXI Compass. This is a tool that we have available to you. It's free. It takes about 5 minutes, if that. And essentially, it's a way for you to prioritize where do you want to dig in a little bit more for your overall CX strategy and program. Because one of the things that happens with customer experience, we need to be concerned about a lot of different places. We have 4 parts of our CXI Navigator framework, including intentional success, which is what we're talking about today. We also have cultural commitment, customer collaboration, and experiential innovation, why we're all doing this. So go ahead and check that out for your organization. And then, we can talk about it. We can figure out, where are you in your program? How can we help you take that next step? But it's free and available to you with both that code or the link, cxicompass.com. All right, first of all, let's talk about goals. When I ask you, what are your customer experience goals as an organization? What are those top goals? I'm curious what you think about. Can you really articulate them? Can you talk about what that will do for your organization? And the reason I'm phrasing it that way is because this is what we see all the time. When I ask that question of our clients, the different leaders that I talk to and work with every week, I say, well, what are your goals? And they say things like, well, we want to listen and respond to customers, or let's create wow experiences. Our CEO really wants us to create wow experiences. Our top CX goal is to create an all-around customer experience. We're too transactional. Let's deliver the perfect experience to our perfect customers. Another one I heard this week was actually, well, we know what a great experience is. We just have to deliver it. And here's the challenge with all of these. How do you know if you're successful? And how is this, for instance, listening and responding to customers, how is that related to the success of your organization? How is that related to the business results that you and your leadership need to get? So, as we talk about this, as we have this conversation today, I want you all to sit up a little straighter, be a little more confident, think about yourself as the leader of this endeavor, because that's what you are as a business leader in your organization. We need to own customer experience in a different way. And it requires so much more than great intentions. When people are first starting to kind of approach the idea of, let's go ahead and have customer experience management or strategy or program, however you phrase it, they say things like, well, we're just starting on this journey. It's very new, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to make a distinction that I made before, but I want you to remember this. Customer experience is happening whether you are intentional or not. Whether you have ever said the words customer experience, it is happening. Your customers are having an experience. The difference is intentionality. The difference is getting very clear on where you want to go with your customers, on behalf of your customers, and ultimately what business results you are trying to achieve. Now, sometimes people say, well, I'm with a nonprofit, or I'm with this, or I'm with a member organization. Great. You still have organizational goals. You still have to meet certain requirements to keep going as an organization. Businesses need to be profitable. Organizations need to be successful in order to continue to deliver to your customers or those you serve. So, as we walk through this, this is really about leadership, vision, strategy. This is about process and discipline, and this is about getting that buy-in from everyone in your organization. None of these are light switch moments. I'm not going to give you a tool today where you say, oh my gosh, by the end of this day, I'll be able to flip the switch and everybody will be bought into customer experience. That's unfortunately not how humans work. So what I want you to do is embrace this idea that you're going to take the right steps to get these foundations right, because it will make every step in the future easier. If you don't have clearly defined goals, if you don't have a clear vision for what success looks like, everything becomes harder. You're doing things in an ad hoc, transactional way instead of really looking at this as part of the overall strategy of your organization. Can you imagine a sales group being told, okay, well, you didn't meet your quota this quarter. That's too bad. I guess sales doesn't work. I guess we're just going to get rid of the sales team. We would never do that, because we understand sales is part of the cost of doing business. We have to invest in a sales strategy, sales people, all of those things in order to achieve what we need for a business. The same thing The same approach has to be taken with customer experience. Now, if I'm saying this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're never going to get here at my organization, I want to take that big, deep breath and think about this as the first step on this journey, because you can do this. Make no small plans, my customer experience friends. We need to stir the hearts of many. Now, when I talked about the topic here, I said that we were talking about the one thing missing from your CX strategy. But here's kind of the 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 short answer. You actually need a strategy. You need a customer experience strategy for real. And those goals we talked about are not a strategy. Having a voice of the customer program is not a strategy. Doing some customer journey mapping, not a strategy. What we need to do is actually identify what we're trying to do. What are those specific outcomes and how can we get there? How can we prioritize and how do we know if we're successful? Now, we use something called a CX strategy success statement that identifies what specific outcomes will be most meaningful. We can't do everything all the time. We can't hit every single perfect business metric. We have to decide, what are we trying to do here? What will be most meaningful for our organization? We want to tie those outcomes back to the larger organizational goals and leadership goals. Our leaders care about different things. We need to speak their language. Our chief marketing officer, our chief revenue officer, they might think differently than our chief financial officer or our chief compliance officer. We need to make sure that we understand where are they coming from so that we can connect the dots for them. Then we want to look at what metrics are there to measure success. How do we actually know we're doing this? Feedback metrics are not enough. If you say, well, we're already tracking NPS or we have all these surveys, that's great. That is part of the equation. It is not the full outcome. We need to be really careful about making sure that we are using metrics as measurements and not outcomes. Outcomes are about the business success overall, the organizational success. And then we have to be realistic here. What are the parameters we have to work within? We might not be able to change our technology. We might not be able to hire more. We might not be able to change that leader who is cynical and skeptical about all of this. So what can we do? Let's be realistic about that, because otherwise we're not setting ourselves up for success. So here are 5 steps to really define your CX strategy. And this is building your success statement. The first is identifying your top organizational goals. Then we're going to talk about leaders. What are they really into and care about? Then we're going to talk about those top CX specific outcomes, what metrics to measure, and then we need to do a reality check. Can we actually do this? Are we doing this the right way? Because the other thing I want this statement to do for you is to protect you a little bit. I work with so many different leaders, both at the executive level and with CX specific titles. And what they tell me again and again is they are on a path that they think, okay, this is what everybody wants, a voice of the customer program. That's what we're working on. And then one complaint from a customer goes all the way up to your executive level. And suddenly that becomes the urgent thing we need to fix. Or somebody comes to you and says, we really need to figure out why our scores are dropping in the digital channel or wherever they're coming from. And I want you to have something where you say, okay, we can talk about that, but these are my current priorities and this is why. So help me, where would this fit in? How can we make sure that we're not just taking everybody else's priority and saying, oh yeah, that does fall under customer experience, because it can feel like that. It can feel like that. And the other thing is, I don't want you to be just a messenger or a number narrator. When you go in and you report on customer experience, it has to be so much more than just talking about the metrics that you happen to be using to measure feedback. All right. Climbing down from my little soapbox here. I hope you're with me. And I hope that you are embracing this as something that you will use, because we have seen this make dramatic changes in really not just the organization, but also the leader. They are seen differently when they have this well articulated. So Understand your organizational goals. What is our overall vision and what are our top goals as an organization? I can't tell you how many times I've been coaching executives and I say, okay, tell me about your organizational goals. And here's what happens. Everybody gets, and they look around and they look at each other and they think, we should know this, but we don't." That is very common. And I say that because some of this is investigation. Some of this is taking on that role. You are deputized as an experienced investigator and go ahead and dig in. Where do you get that information? Should you know that information? Absolutely. Do I know that a lot of organizations don't really have these? Uh-huh. And so we need to do our best to figure out what are the top organizational goals. If you don't know, if you're really stuck and you're like, I have no idea, we haven't really defined them, or in some large organizations, it takes months to trickle down. Two things are always true. Your organization is always trying to get more revenue or members or customers. Pretty much that is always true. Or, or I should say, they're trying to lower expenses because that equation, expenses versus revenue, that's where profitability comes from. That's where we can always define success around that. So if you don't know where to start, think about how could we, like, are we really trying to raise revenue this year? Have we heard about that? You might have that defined as, specific kind of how to in your goals. Things like, we're trying to get more market share. We're trying to get more share of wallet. We're trying, all of those things. You might have that type of language in your goals. But ultimately, all of that is about more revenue. So if you don't know where to start, you can start there. The other side of that is, how can we lower expenses? How can we become more efficient as an organization so we don't have certain costs? So if you don't know where to start, think about, are you providing a lot of refunds? Are you having a lot of complaints? Do you have a lot of service calls or repairs? Those types of things can give you an idea of where could you lower those expenses by making the experience better. Once you lower those expenses, that immediately has an impact on your profitability in a positive way. But you see that I'm not talking about just customer experience numbers or metrics here. I'm not just talking about voice of the customer. You've probably heard building a business case for your customer experience programs and projects. I totally agree with that. This is thinking one level up from that. This is thinking about, what are we doing as an organization? Because otherwise, every business case could be seen as a priority. But there are times we have to make decisions. We don't have unlimited resources or time. If you have unlimited resources or time, go ahead and give us a high five in the chat, because I would like to meet you. But most of us have limited resources, limited time, limited people, limited budgets. That's the reality of where we are. So let's live within that reality. So then we've got our organizational goals, even if they're not perfect, right? But we know kind of where we're going. What are those big, juicy goals? Then we want to think about our leaders, and we want to get into their heads about what's in it for them. How do they measure success for themselves and their teams? And if you don't know, this is a great opportunity to either cross-functionally reach out to other leaders, or even go up in the org chart and say, hey, I would love an informational interview just to understand, what are your goals? How do what's most important to you for this organization? Some of this you can infer as well. Your chief revenue officer, they want great finances, right? They want to make sure that you're profitable. They want to lower expenses. All those things are very important to them. Your chief marketing officer probably wants more customer acquisition. They want more people in the funnel so that they can, and more awareness of the brand. So how can you support that? Your chief revenue officer wants more sales. So really get into, what does everybody really care about? And if you have a ton of leaders and this sounds overwhelming, think about those original goals. Who has the most impact on those original goals? Who would care about those organizational goals that you've identified the most? And then narrow your focus on those leaders. The reason is, we need to speak their language. I have seen so many customer experience leaders walk into executive sessions and say things like, well, look, our NPS is steady and we're doing well. And the leaders look at each other and think, what does this mean? Why is this important? We're worried about maybe, we've got a big acquisition coming up. How are we going to deal with that? We are under fire from a segment of our customers because we weren't able to deliver. We aren't as profitable as we wanted. We're not getting the sales. They have all of that going on in their brain. And we're saying things like, well, NPS is steady and it doesn't connect. So we have to make sure we are speaking their language. So we can actually translate into this we're putting in these efforts because we believe that if we could decrease our service calls by preventing those service issues from the beginning, we know that will bring down our service cost. We know that we could apply some of that to proactive outreach for our customers to get more referrals, to get more reviews, whatever it is. So we really have to kind of break down strategically, what are we trying to do for the organization and for each leader? And this is how we put it all together. We want to look for those related specific outcomes. So where are those overlaps between the organizational goals and the individual leadership goals? And then what specific outcomes support both goals? So if you have a leader who is very invested in, we have to get more awareness for our brand. We have to get more people in the funnel. That maybe you have a chief marketing officer who's very into that. Well, what can we do to support that? Well, maybe we could support more peer customer education. Maybe we could make sure that we share throughout the organization more of the great feedback that we are getting that could be turned into marketing pieces, that could be turned into case studies. There are all sorts of levers we can pull. And sometimes they're inside the organization like that. Sometimes it's about visibility and communication within the organization. That's a great goal, but we have to tie that to how is this going to help the organization and how is this going to help your goal leader? So that's where we get into what are we really trying to do here? And then we think about how do we know if we're good at this? How do we know if we're successful? That's where we get into metrics. Metrics come in a lot of different flavors. So, yes, when I talk about metrics, customer feedback metrics can certainly be a measurement of what we're trying to do. We also want to look at operational metrics. How are people actually behaving? What is actually going on with the business? As well as things like behavioral analytics, social media sentiment. There are all sorts of things we can look at. But if you think about the experiential measurements like feedback and the operational metrics, that gives you a more complete picture of what's happening. That's where you can also start connecting the dots between, we're seeing this dip here in our transactional CSAT scores. Well, that's information we can use. That's when we say, hey, we need to investigate what's going on here because something's happening. Oh, well, we made an upgrade and nobody likes it. Or we sent these things out. This just happened recently where, this was in one of our newsletters, where an organization changed the scent of something, of a lotion, basically. And they got so many complaints because they had been unscented. And they just assumed because some customers had said on surveys, it would be nice if you had some scents. They assumed this is what they want. And then they had to come back and say, okay, we're not getting the sales we want. We're seeing a lot of complaints. We need to revert back. And that's exactly what they did. But they can only do that if you're looking at everything holistically. So make sure that you understand what are the metrics to measure. Sometimes I think of goals in two different categories. And I think I have Michael Hyatt and my full focus planner to thank for this, because there are, when you write out your goals, there's either a habit goal or an achievement goal. So a habit goal is something like, we need everybody to use the CRM, right? We need to get our usage rate up to 80% rather than 30% or wherever you are. That is more about building a habit. That's more about tracking things over time. That's a fine goal, but that's how we have to think about it. What will that do for the organization? Well, it will provide more visibility. We believe this visibility will allow us to help the customer through the journey to make their next purchase easier, faster, whatever it is. There's also the achievement goal. Sometimes the achievement is, gosh, we need a CRM system. We don't have one. We need to implement one. So that is a great goal too, but we have to again tie that back. So really get realistic about what can you measure and what's most important to measure. Because sometimes it's not about just the feedback, it's about things like usage rates, it's about things like purchase rates, retention, renewal, um, customer service calls, all of those things. So get really clear about what you're measuring and how that ties again back to your organizational goals. And then we need to define success based on reality. This is where we ask ourselves, can we really do this? I've seen quite a few strategies where I look at it and within 30 seconds, I think this is impossible, right? I'm looking at a team of 4 people and they think they're going to, just knock it out of the park in a year. And I love the ambition and I love the optimism. But if we set expectations that we can't meet, it's just like customer experience. We have to make sure we are setting the right expectations, realistic expectations. Are we going to meet every single goal every time? Absolutely not. But we are actually going to learn from the misses as well. We're going to understand, like, oh, we didn't really get that acquisition goal we were trying to, but we saw some progress. So, what does that tell us? Well, it tells us this is working and maybe this isn't. Because measurements are all about getting insights. We need to make sure we are looking at the insights, learning from them, and acting on them, just like a voice of the customer program. So, as we get through this, we need to ask ourselves, is this really rooted in reality? Are there obstacles or limiting factors like technology or governance or anything that might get in the way of what we're trying to do? And are we really setting ourselves up for success? So, once you've answered these questions, then you want to kind of put it together. Now, this is a template, but I will tell you, I don't think I've ever seen one that follows this perfectly, because you might have written your goals a certain way. You might have certain standards. Some of your organizations use KPIs or OKRs or these different standards around this. I just saw a comment about EOS. We are an EOS company. And there's no perfect scorecard measurement for this unless you've already defined success. So that's what I would say about that. So as we go through this, I'm going to show you a few real life examples. We've redacted information, obviously, and some of these might not, you might think we would never be able to do that. That's okay. It's to show you the process of how these things are thought of. So the first one is a financial services organization. And they said, these are the things we're dedicated to. In my humble opinion, these are still too general, but these came from the top. This was what they were kind of assigned to. They said digital first, data driven, improvement focused. All right, cool. So these outcomes, how do they serve our broader organizational goals? They had specific metrics around these: increased customer engagement, increased customer loyalty, higher customer retention. That customer retention one was a hot one. They needed to make sure that they really understood how to measure that and how to make sure they could report that out. They also thought about their leadership. They wanted to make sure that they were increasing operational efficiency, and that meant some system integration work. And you'll see there were specific metrics around this. We want to meet our customers where they are, providing convenient, friction-free solutions. Again, specific metrics around how many customers were able to use certain channels. Was there an increase in awareness in making sure that they got what they needed? Could they get through the journey faster? There were all sorts of things that we could measure around that. And then, of course, we wanted to get into those measurements. Products per household, both digital and non-digital solutions. So they had specific goals around this. Reduced customer churn, new customer growth through the number of referrals. They had a robust referral program. This was about really leaning into that. Now, will the customer experience leader and team be able to actually improve all of these things? They might not be the ones in control of some of the things that are needed for this, right? But by getting leadership buy-in to this, by having a cross-functional leader who says, yes, I'm willing to support this, then people start connecting the dots that this is not a department, a team, a leader. This is about everyone and what we're doing. It's that important to the business. So that's one example. The next one was a very complex global B2B organization. And I'm going to show you just a piece of what they did. Because sometimes what happens is we need to start here with the strategy and then kind of umbrella it out to the different teams, middle managers, all of those folks. We have to make sure that everybody kind of understands where they fit in. So this was one piece. So they had identified repair and optimize as some of their goals. So understand customers from their perspective across the entire journey through qualitative and quantitative research. And then they had a plan for what that research could be for the year. We want to utilize our NPS resources to gain insights to improve our customer experience. We want to communicate that understanding to employees and partners. Again, there were goals around these things. Evolve our digital capabilities to improve online and offline customer experiences by leveraging our customer success platform, digital roadmap, and customer engine and insights. This is one of those things where it's kind of getting everybody into the habit of, we have these tools for you. We need to start tapping into them more. We need to make sure that our teams in the field understand that we have insights and they have access to those insights. So really thinking through, what is it we can do within this time period? When we've talked about the idea of a customer experience mission statement, that is a long-term tool. This is a more time-bound idea. You'll often see a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year strategy at different organizations. Once you've identified that, that's what you want to work within. So wherever you are in your organization, you need to work within the parameters that are set there. So this is to recap these 5 steps. I think Paige dropped in the link for our customer success statement workbook that has a lot of resources for you. And really, this isn't just an idea or a theory. It's tangible. It's an actionable document that defines how success will be measured and inspires achieving those metrics. So this is your guide to what are we doing. It also helps you prioritize, as I mentioned. It helps you say, this is what we're working on and this is why, and get that buy-in from everybody. Because otherwise it can become so ad hoc. You can be doing, improvement in one area on a Tuesday, and by Thursday you're being pulled into something else because something else is seen as urgent. I want you to have a vision. I want you to have a strategy so that you can really lead, so that you can really see the results of what you're doing. You can plan for it, you can step into it, and then you can actually achieve what not only you are setting out to achieve, but what your organization is setting out to achieve. Now, I know this is a lot, and whenever I introduce this idea, sometimes people get caught up on, well, we already have goals around NPS, or we already have goals. Great, but let's think about what those are doing. Why are you tracking those? You're tracking those to make sure that you are delivering to customers and that you are staying ahead of their needs. So if you are not connecting that back to actual dollars and cents, how are you adding to the profit and loss sheet of your organization? How are you dropping some dollar bills into the cash register? We need to think like that, and we need to make sure we are connecting those dots. So with that, I think we have some questions and different things. I know that this can be, again, a lot for a discussion like this. I encourage you to check out our workbook, which is available to you at that link. And then don't forget about the CXI Compass as well, because that can help you as well.
Yes. And I just wanted to say, just from talking to different people and different organizations, so often we hear executive buy-in as a problem. It's one of the biggest roadblocks that people run into. And if you are thinking in this manner, if you're building your CX strategy from organization into the customer journey, it makes that less difficult.
Yes.
There's less friction because it's all aligned, but that can be tricky.
Mhm.
So take our CXI Compass and we'll talk you through it.
Yeah.
How about
Well, and it's a really, really good point because yes, and there's so much data out there too that shows that that is one of the biggest obstacles. And I
that?
think personally, it's because for a long time in this industry, we had people who told everybody, like, just track the one metric. That's the key, right? Like, just track NPS or just track CSAT or just track whatever. And there's no magic metric, number one. And those metrics are measurements, they aren't outcomes. And we treated them like outcomes. And so put yourself in the position of the leader who has all these responsibilities, needs to make sure the organization is successful. And then people come in and just start talking about these, our customers really like us. Yay. Well, that doesn't really do anything for them. That doesn't really help them move the needle. We are really looking at how can we make sure that people understand. I mean, I'm passionate about this because I know that when we invest in the right way in customer experience efforts, everybody wins.
Yes.
The organization wins, the leaders win, employees win. It's a nicer place to work. Customers win, everybody wins. But we have to build that case from the top. And there are lots of reasons to build a specific business case if you are asking for an investment, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we do this here at Experienced Investigators, right? People come to me and they say, we want this software. And I'm like, cool. Why?
Yeah, why?
Yeah,
Measure. What are we tying it to?
exactly. So we have to build those business cases, but those have to tie into this bigger strategy. And this just gives you so much more credibility and so much more leverage when you are asking for those investments, because you can then say, we agreed, this is what we agreed was the strategy because of all these organizational outcomes. If we invest in, maybe you need another analyst, maybe you need somebody on your team and you're asking for additional headcount, you could even say, this is why. Like, I believe that this is the business case because that will help us achieve these goals, live this strategy that we all put our stamp on and said, yes, this is what we want to do.
Yeah.
So it can be a little scary. And I say that very honestly. I always encourage our leaders, you have to be a little brave. You have to be a little brave here, because sometimes even introducing this, the leader might be thinking, well, what are you talking about, person? I just asked you to listen to customers, right? So we have to sometimes work on this, communicate, over communicate, build that case. And when you have it defined this way, it just gives you something to rely on. It gives you something to articulate and share and socialize. And then every single request you get, you can bounce up against this. Wow, that sounds really urgent. I need to ask the question, how will this help us live our strategy? Right? Because otherwise we get pulled in way, way too many directions. And
Yeah.
I don't want that for you.
We don't want that. We don't want to boil the ocean. We
Yes.
want to figure out a solid CX strategy where we're all speaking the same language from C-suite to customer facing. That's
Yes.
the
Yes.
goal.
And, yesterday I was working with a group of leaders and one of them wanted to boil the ocean. And I said, okay, let's think about this differently. Let's say one day you wake up and you think, mountain climbing looks really cool. I think I'm going to get into mountain climbing. And you go, well, maybe I'll try Kilimanjaro tomorrow, right? Like, maybe I'll just do that.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Of course we wouldn't do that. Of course we wouldn't. We need to make sure that we are getting that foundation of both how to do it, get in shape to do it, get the right supplies, plan for it, all of those things. And that has to happen with customer experience as well. All right, I'm going to take a breath and see if we have some questions here.
We do. Mark just came in and asked, what is the most common objection from the C-suite to implement CX strategy? What is your silver bullet to overcome?
Well, I think we have to, again, define what we're talking about in general first, because sometimes what I see is people come in to the executives and they say, customer experience is really important. It's so important because our customers really need an experience. And they haven't really talked about the fact that we are being intentional, we are being strategic, and that's what's going to push the organization forward. So the silver bullet is really about defining, what does success look like? How do we know? How are we going to measure it for real? And tying that success to our organizational vision. If we don't take the time to do that, it is just too easy for executives to think, well, just keep sending out the surveys. We're fine, right? In fact, we don't even need a person for that anymore. Just let AI do that. It becomes about the numbers and not what we're doing with the numbers. So make sure that when we are presenting this, We are thinking about how are we telling our story? How are we really getting inside their emotions, their needs as leaders? We've done some sessions like this about storytelling and about scorecards, because customer experience scorecards often are just full of numbers, and we disconnect that with humanity. So we have to do both. We have to show quantitative and qualitative. We have to connect back to the customers that we're serving and the organization. And think about our leaders, the ones we're talking to. Think about them as customers. What do they need? What are their expectations? Once we get into that mindset, then we can really connect the dots with them. If we are only talking about customer happiness, if we are only talking about those loosey goosey goals, like, we're going to, our, I've seen this a lot where people say, well, we're going to deliver a world class experience, but we don't say what that is or why that's important. All they hear when we do that is, so you want to invest because it's a nice thing to do. No, we're going to give them a return on that investment. So the silver bullet is defining, what will this do for the organization? And what will this do for you, leader? What keeps them up at night? If we can answer that, if we can help them with that concern, they're going to want to be in our corner. They're going to get that. We're going to get that buy-in.
Something that I feel like I say all the time when I'm talking to people is a regular mantra of ours is that CX is not this separate thing. It is in everything. It's in every move you make. It is in every piece of the company. It's everybody's business, because
Yep.
it really does have ripples. And if you are thinking of it from your customer's perspective, you will have happy customers and
Yep.
happy C-suite and happy organizations. So I think that sometimes it seemed like this side thing that you have to pick up and do, when in reality it needs to be built into the strategy of everything.
Absolutely. And I think the other part of that is, when we talk about customer experience, sometimes people who are not directly related to the customers, like if they are not serving the customer directly, they check out and they think, well, this doesn't really apply to me. So another really important piece of this for buy-in is to understand what happens when the supply chain is late. That affects customer experience. What happens when we are not responsive within the organization to one another? Well, that affects the customer experience. So, yes, you can talk about this as internal customers. Sometimes that's the language people like. I think about it as every single person has a role delivering to the customer, every single one.
Yep.
The irony is, the further up you get in an org chart, you're typically further away from the customer. So the people at the top are not really the ones who understand the customer experience. I hate to say that, but sometimes that's true. So we have to make sure that we are connecting those dots for them. And that's why it's so important to use storytelling techniques, to use real quotes from customers, videos, audio, whatever we have, to connect emotionally with, this is what's really happening and how it's impacting people. We are now seeing a lot of, obviously, AI introduced
Yep.
to the customer journey. Some of it is great. I'm a big believer in it, but I encourage everybody to kind of take a beat and figure out, again, how does this fit into our strategy? Because AI is not a strategy. It's it's something
Cool.
that can supplement. Yeah, but it's not. So think of this, having a strategy like this defined also helps you with questions about technology and tools and where to invest. And that's another way to really get that buy-in from your leaders as well.
Okay, we've got another one here. Excuse me while I move it over. In your experience, what is the most overlooked aspect of customer experience that can significantly impact customer loyalty, and how can businesses address it effectively?
So, first of all, great question. I really think that neglect is the number one thing that can impact customer loyalty. And this shows up in a couple of different ways. One is, we as business people have been taught to only invest in getting customers, right? Business development, sales, acquisition. That's what it's all about. That's who gets all the money. That's who, all sorts of things around that. So we spend all this time wooing customers and we say, come join us. We love you. Come in. We're going to treat you so well. And then when they become a customer, we haven't really thought intentionally about what is that experience after they pay the bill, right? So that is one thing, is just neglect overall in the actual customer experience. The other thing, the other place this shows up is we kind of rest on our laurels and we think, look at all of our loyal customers. We're so lucky. They love us. It's fine. And we neglect to realize that somebody right now in this moment is trying to disrupt our industry through experience. Think about many of the disruptions of the last 2 decades. Airbnb, Netflix, Uber. Those are all experience driven. They aren't product driven. So somebody right now is trying to disrupt your industry. And if it's not you, you will be disrupted. And so if we neglect this idea of, in our framework, we call it experiential innovation. We gather all these insights about customers. We make sure that we understand them. And then we don't use that to innovate. That is also neglect. We need to make sure that we are innovating around experience so that we can keep our customers not just today, but in the future. Because customers are loyal until they're not. We were all loyal at one point to some organization out there, some brand, that now today we go, oh, that was quaint, right? Oh, that's when I used to be a customer over there, but I'm over here now because you know what? Cable's not worth it. We're all streaming now or whatever. So think about, how are you neglecting customers? How are you neglecting the idea of really innovating on their behalf for the experience? Those two things, I think, impact loyalty more than people give them credit for. Neglect also shows up in what I call the meh moments. This is where we have moments throughout the journey that aren't terrible. They're not enough to drive somebody away, but they aren't building trust. They are eroding trust. I often call these micro moments. This is where we talk about the small moments that are easy to overlook, that are just kind of automated or just kind of there, but they don't make people feel more connected or loyal or appreciated. They're not meaningful. They aren't something that really helps people feel like they're dealing with humans. So that's another way neglect shows up. If you can turn up the volume on those moments, then you'll have more positive moments in the journey. And we need more positive moments to overcome the negative things that will happen. We have to put a lot in that emotional bank to make sure that when negative things happen, because they will, there's enough trust and relationship built there so they will stay loyal. So great question. And
Great.
yeah, neglect is something we overlook a lot. That would be a great topic for one of these.
Yeah. I think also on that same vein of thought, we talk a lot about being number narrators and collecting the data.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between what customers say and what they do.
Yes.
And you have to look at both to effectively keep those positive moments in your customer journeys.
Yes, absolutely. And we cannot neglect behavioral information, operational metrics, those things that tell us more than just what people are saying. And the other truth we're living in is fewer and fewer people are responding, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're only relying on what customers happen to tell you, then you're missing out on a whole bunch of things that they're trying to tell you without telling you. Right. It's like that social media trend. Tell me without telling me.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, Mark's got a real fiery one here.
Oh, good.
What do you think is the number one use case for AI related to enhancing CX?
Oh, that's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
Whew. I don't know if there's a number one, but the two places I'm seeing it that I appreciate the most. One is just the way that AI can find patterns in data and the way that we can lean into that in such a faster way than we can with humans. It's just the reality of the situation. Now, of course, we need to make sure the AI is looking for the right patterns and set up in a way that hopefully, if not eliminates, diminishes bias and all those things. So you need to make sure it's set up in the right way and that you're prompting it the right way. But you can ask it to go through data, and it's just crazy how fast it can be. And a lot of the tools out there now, a lot of the feedback tools, a lot of the customer data platforms, they now are incorporating this as an element of how to use AI and machine learning. I really like that because it means that we can respond faster to customer needs and we can get to the results we want faster. So, all of that I think is a really good way to use it. The other thing I like is how, and this is probably more mature than some of the other places where we're using it, the way that it can prompt the right conversation, the right resources in a natural way for both the people serving customers in contact centers as well as customers themselves. And what I mean by that is if you are in a contact center, I mean, if you go way back, these poor folks, right? They would get calls and say, "Oh, that's a repair issue," and have to take the binder for repair and then go through and find the right code or whatever it was. And it's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of, we're relying on them to like read and comprehend and understand and then give the right information to the customer in that moment. With AI now and natural language processing specifically, they can type into a tool and say, repair on this person has a repair on whatever. Or voice recognition now, some of the AI can do that right away. So it just gets served up to them. They have the right information in the right moment for the customer. The other part of this that's so important that I don't think we're quite there yet, we need to understand where the customer is on their journey very specifically. A lot of places are getting better at this. A lot of AI is getting better at this. But if you're a customer on a chat and it's an AI chat and it doesn't go well, there are these endless loops customers can get in. We need to give people escape hatches. We need to make sure that everybody understands that if this isn't working for you, here's a way to talk to somebody. We haven't done that very well. But if they are on this chat and then they pick up the phone and they call the contact center, that person has to know this is where they're coming from. This is what they said in the chat. This is why they're probably already upset. AI can help us surface and connect those dots in a really great way too. But again, we have to be set up the right way. We have to have lots of centralization of customer data, which also requires more concern and understanding around security and data privacy and all of those really, really important things. But if we can surface where somebody is in the journey at the right moment, then we can serve them better. So I really like those two things. But I mentioned it's also good for customers because then in self-service, customers have more options to get through things and get the right information as they need it in a very natural way. Not all customers like or need self-service. Self-service isn't the answer for everything. So we again need to be careful about making sure we are meeting customers where they are in the journey in that specific moment. Context is everything. Sometimes we want self-service, sometimes we don't. We have to make sure that those things are available throughout, but that AI can track that whole journey for us. That's a great use of how to use it to improve the customer experience and ultimately customer loyalty.
So true. AI is great, but you have to be so strategic and
Mhm.
well thought when using it. Our last question here: how can we ensure our CX strategy stays agile and adapts to changing customer expectations?
Great question. So this is like any other strategy, really. We need to, I mean, 3, 4 years ago, many business strategy, they didn't mention AI. They didn't mention the things that we're talking about, but now they all do because it's an important part of where we are in the world. And so it's like anything else. We need to make sure we are adapting, that we are connected to not only our organizational goals, but also macro goals. What's happening in the world that could impact this? Um, I've used this example before, but during the pandemic and when everything suddenly was locked down, people were like, whoa, I need to get groceries. How am I going to get groceries? And these grocery stores that had this long strategy around, hey, eventually we're going to offer digital ordering and curbside pickup, some of them went from 3 years to 6 weeks to execute that. So when the need is there, we can sometimes do that. We can sometimes say, nope, stop everything. This is where we need to invest. This is where we need to put our time. When that happens, we have to adapt. When customers tell us that they are looking for something else, and we're seeing that in the way that we measure for success, we're seeing dips, then we want to address that. We want to move that up the priority list. So it's like any other part of business strategy. It can't be just a document. It can't be something that you put together and you say, oh, good, we've got a strategy. Good for us. It's essentially a plan, a series of maneuvers that we are planning to take to get to certain outcomes. The term strategy, I use this in my keynote sometimes. The term strategy actually comes from the Greek. And I always think about it as, it's really about the battlefield. It's really about coming up with, okay, how are we going to attack this? And of course, in those battles, you have to adjust. You have to be nimble and agile and all of those things. So this is no different. We have to make sure that we are looking at the big picture. And that's where this strategy comes in, and specifically defining it with that success statement. And then we have to drill down and think, okay, how is this impacting us this quarter, this year, in the next 3 years? Do we have to adjust? Just like your own personal goals, there are times where you go, I'm going to read, 52 books this year. I'm going to read a book a week. And then you get into about week 3 and you go, once a month, that's good. I'm still reading. That's good. So you adjust, and that's fine. We have to figure out what's working for our organization and our people, what's working for customers, and where are their expectations going, to make sure we're constantly staying ahead of them.
Mark asked a question that ties in with that, which is, how often should a company revisit their CX strategy?
Yeah, this is really a custom thing as well, but it's time bound. So, in our organization, just, transparently here, we have a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan. And so when we're looking at our 1 year, that's something we can look at, every few months and say, hey, are we on track? Are we not? How does this impact the 3 year? How does this impact the 5 year? So that's exactly what this is as well. It's a time bound document. And so when you're writing these goals, that's another way to think about it. What can we do in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months, in the next 3 years? And that gives you a gauge, really, to see about your progress as you go.
Right. And I know ours personally are tied to our larger organizational goals. So where do we want to be? What do we want to do in 3 years, 5 years? So we try and always tie those. We try to walk what we talk, we tie them all together to have a good experience from top to bottom.
That's right. That's right. And I think a lot of organizations are driven quarterly. Some of you are on different fiscal years, things like that. So just, how does it best fit in with your own organizational cadence? That's how I would think about it. All right. Such good questions as always. And yeah, we've got the success statement workbook for you. We have the CXI Compass. Really encourage you to check that out. And then don't forget, if you have more questions, you can ask me directly. Once a week, I am on my podcast answering questions from leaders like you. So you can check that out. You can subscribe, hopefully, at Experience Action with Jeannie Walters on wherever you listen. We also have a playlist on YouTube. And if you have questions, you can leave me a question at askjeannie.vip. It's very simple. You can do it from your phone or your laptop or wherever, and you can be anonymous or not. And if you have listened, we love your reviews and referrals and ratings. So if you haven't already done that, please go ahead and check that out. And then, we've got all these other resources for you, because our mission is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And we do that by empowering leaders like you. So please check these things out. LinkedIn learning courses. We've got the podcast, more resources at experienceinvestigators.com. And then, of course, we have the YouTube playlist of all sorts of sessions just like this. You can see my hair go up and down and all sorts of things. So happy Friday, everybody. Keep up the good work. I know this is not always as easy as people think it is. And I really love supporting leaders like you who are making real change in the world. So keep it up. Keep fighting the good fight on behalf of your customers. And we will see you again here soon. Thanks.